There are two kinds of men: the ones who notice and appreciate what they have, and the ones who only notice when someone else is about to take it. For Moon Tae-oh, he changed women the way he changed his cars. Nothing in his life was allowed to stay long enough to matter. Nothing except the woman who sat outside his office and ran his entire empire, and whom he had never once thought of as a woman at all. Until the night she walked out in a dress on her way to someone else, and the man who felt nothing on purpose felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. Before we go on, tell us where you're watching from, your city, your country. We love seeing how far these stories travel, and if you've ever been the person who does everything and gets seen by no one, stay with me all the way to the end. This one is for you. Now, let me take you back to that Friday evening. Every Monday for 3 years, Layla Reed bought herself a single fresh flower. She did it on the way to work, from the old woman who ran the flower cart outside Hannam Station, and she carried it up 41 floors of the Vante Group Tower and set it in a small glass jar on the corner of her desk, where the light was best. One week it was a ranunculus the color of butter. The next, a single stem of freesia. It was never a bouquet. It was never expensive. It was just one good thing, chosen by her, for her, because she had learned somewhere in her 20s that if you waited around for other people to bring you flowers, you could wait a very long time. And Layla had never been the waiting kind. Nobody in that building had ever once asked about the flower. Not the executives who swept past her desk on their way to see the chairman. Not the junior staff who brought her their disasters to fix. And certainly not the man behind the double doors of the corner office. The man whose entire life she held together with both hands. Moon Tae-oh, chief executive of the Vante Group, 35 years old, worth more money than most small countries, and, as far as Layla could tell, functionally blind to anything that could not turn a profit or wear a size 2. She had worked for him for 3 years. In that time, she had watched a great many beautiful women come through the private elevator and go back down it a season later, replaced, like the cars in his collection, the moment the shine wore off. There had been the model with the silver hair, the actress, the heiress with the laugh like breaking glass. Right now, it was Che-rin, a runway girl with cheekbones you could cut bread on, who called the office 4 times a day and treated Layla like a switchboard. Layla scheduled their dinners, sent their apologies, and, when the time came, quietly arranged the parting gift. Always jewelry, always couriered, so that Tae-oh never had to have the conversation himself. He did not do goodbyes. He did not do anything that lasted long enough to hurt. Layla understood him better than he understood himself, which was a lonely kind of knowledge to carry. She knew he took his coffee scalding and black, and pretended not to notice she left a square of dark chocolate on the saucer every morning, though the chocolate always disappeared. She knew he answered emails at 3 in the morning because he did not sleep. She knew that behind all that beautiful, bored indifference was a man who had decided, a long time ago, that wanting things was a weakness other people could use against you, and so he had simply stopped, on purpose, with the grim discipline of a man holding his own hand over a flame. None of which was her problem tonight, because tonight Layla had a life. It was Friday, a little after 6, and she stood in the doorway of his office in a dress she had bought for herself on a whim 3 weeks ago and had not yet found the nerve to wear. It was gold. Deep, warm, liquid gold, and it did not hide a single thing about her, not the full curve of her hips, or the soft round of her belly, or the generous shape of her, and that was the entire point. Because Layla Reed had spent enough of her life folded into dark blazers, built to make her smaller, and she was done. Her hair was down for once, loose and long past her shoulders. Her lipstick was a warm bronze. She had a handbag on her arm and somewhere to be, and she felt, for the first time in a long time, exactly like herself. Tae-oh, of course, did not look up. He was at his desk in a burgundy jacket over a black shirt. Phone in one hand, thumb moving, the city going navy and gold in the glass wall behind him. Layla had learned years ago not to wait for his attention to begin. She simply began. "Your car's downstairs at 8 tomorrow for the Busan property walkthrough," she said, crossing to set his signed folders on the desk. "I moved it up an hour so you'd beat the weather." The Yoon Group contract is redlined. I flagged the 2 clauses their lawyers will fight, and my notes are on the second page. You'll want to read them before you agree to anything, Chae-rin called. I told her you were in a board meeting. I also took the liberty of confirming Sunday brunch at the hotel because you were going to forget, and if you're planning to end things with her, and I think you are, please do it before Sunday, so I don't have to cancel a reservation for 2 the way I did in March. Nothing. Thumb moving. A small frown at whatever was on the screen. I've handled everything for the weekend, Layla went on, unbothered. The whole thing runs without you, so I'm leaving a little early tonight. I have somewhere to be. She set the last folder down, squared it neatly with the edge of the desk, out of 3 years of habit, and turned to go. That was when Moon Tae-oh looked up. He would try, later, to reconstruct exactly what made him lift his head at that precise second. The sound of her heels turning on the marble, maybe. Some animal instinct he had spent a decade training himself not to have. Whatever it was, he looked up from his phone, and Layla Reed was walking away from him in a gold dress, and every single thought in Moon Tae-oh's head went out like a snuffed candle. He had looked at some of the most beautiful women in Asia. He had grown so used to beauty that it bored him, the way you stop tasting sugar if you eat it every day. And he had, apparently, been sitting 8 feet from this for 3 years and never once seen it. This warmth, this ease, the confident roll of her walk, the way the gold caught the last of the light and made her glow like something lit from inside. His chest did something it had no business doing. His pulse climbed. The phone, forgotten, tilted in his hand. "Are you going?" Tae-oh heard himself say, in a voice he did not recognize. "In that dress?" Layla stopped. She turned back, one eyebrow rising slowly, and looked at him with the mild, unimpressed patience she had perfected over 3 years of managing his moods. "Yes," she said, "that's generally how it works. You put on the dress, you go out in the dress." But he wasn't laughing, and that was strange. His jaw had gone tight. His eyes moved over her again, quick and hot and unmistakable, and something possessive and dark had climbed into his face that she had never seen there before. Not for any contract, not for any of his rivals, not for anything. "Where are you going?" he asked. Lower now. Careful. Out. Layla adjusted the bag on her arm. "It's Friday, Mr. Moon. People go out. With who?" She blinked. The question landed in the quiet office like a dropped glass. In 3 years, he had never asked her a single thing about her life. Not her last name for the first 2 weeks. Not where she lived. Not whether she had people, plans, a heart that beat when she left the building. She had been, to him, a very good machine that produced order and coffee, and now he was standing behind his desk, with his knuckles pressed white to the wood, asking her who she was seeing, as if it were any of his business, as if it had ever once occurred to him that she went anywhere at all. If your stomach just did a little flip, you and Layla are having the exact same night. Do me a favor and tap that like button. And drop me a comment. When did he start caring? Because that's the question sitting in her chest right now too. Now, back to it. "That," Layla said slowly, "is a genuinely fascinating question for you to be asking, given that you couldn't have told a courtroom my birthday an hour ago." She tilted her head. "It's my best friend Tony's birthday. There's a party. I'm going to it. Alone, if it matters. Which I can't imagine why it would. Your weekend is handled. Enjoy Busan." She turned again, and this time she made it almost to the outer office before his voice caught her. Layla. He never used her first name. 3 years. And it had always been Miss Reed, clipped or nothing at all. Hearing it in his mouth now, low and uncertain, stopped her more effectively than a hand on her arm. She looked back. Moon Tae-oh was standing in the middle of his enormous office, in his beautiful clothes with the whole glittering city behind him. And for the first time since she had known him, he looked like he did not have the next line. He opened his mouth, closed it. "Nothing," he said finally. "Have a good night." "I intend to," Layla said, and left. The door closed behind her, and Moon Tae-oh sat back down at his desk, and did not touch his phone again for the rest of the night. He tried to read the Yoon Group red lines, and got 3 sentences in before he realized he was seeing a gold dress instead of words. He got up. He looked out at the river. He noticed, for the very first time, that there was a small glass jar on the corner of Miss Reed's empty desk with a single yellow flower in it, and he had absolutely no idea how long it had been there, or who had put it there, or why the sight of it made something ache behind his ribs. Layla, meanwhile, was on the far side of the river having the best night she'd had in months, and not thinking about her boss at all, or trying not to. Tony had rented the back room of a wine bar in Yeonam-dong, string lights and good music, and 40 people who actually saw Layla when she walked in. Her friends whooped at the dress. Tony cried a little, because Tony cried at everything, and pulled her into the middle of the room and made her dance. For a few hours, Layla was not the woman who ran an empire from a desk in the hall. She was just herself, warm and funny and gold, laughing with her whole body, and it felt like taking off shoes that had been a half size too small for 3 years. It was near the drinks table that she met Theo. "Okay, I have to know," he said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses and an easy smile. "Who let you out looking like that?" Because there should have been a warning. He was tall and warm-eyed, and clearly not from around here. A black American like her, an architect, it turned out, in Seoul, for a 2-year project on a new arts complex by the river. He was a friend of Tony's. He was funny without trying too hard, and he looked at Layla the way she had spent all evening being looked at by everyone except the one person who was paid to look at her, which is to say, like she was a person, and an interesting one, and worth the whole of his attention. They talked for an hour. About Seoul, about home, about the strange specific loneliness of building a life in a language that wasn't the one you dreamed in. When Theo asked, at the end of the night, whether he could take her to dinner sometime, properly, Layla surprised herself by saying yes. She did not notice the man in the burgundy jacket who had a car idling across the street. Because Moon Tae-oh, 3 hours after telling her to have a good night, had done something he had never done for any woman in his life. He had made his driver find out where the party was. He had told himself it was because she had his weekend schedule, and he might need her. He had sat in the back of the car outside a wine bar in Yeonam-dong like a man he did not recognize, and through the front window, he had watched Layla Reed laugh in her gold dress with a tall stranger's hand light on her arm, and he had felt something crawl up his throat that he had spent a decade making sure he would never feel again. He told his driver to go. He did not sleep. And in the morning, on the way to Busan, he was so short with everyone that a junior manager quietly cried in the airport bathroom, and Moon Tae-oh, who had never in his life wondered whether he was the villain of anyone's story, spent the whole flight wondering exactly that. Something was wrong with him. He diagnosed it the way he diagnosed everything, coldly, in the third person. He had a problem. The problem had a shape, and the shape was a woman in a gold dress, and the fact that another man had put his hand on her arm had made him want to burn the wine bar to the ground. This was, by any measure he owned, insane. She was his assistant. She was, he reminded himself, not the type of woman he dated, which was a thought that turned out, on inspection, to be the ugliest thought he had ever had, because when he looked at it directly, he saw that it meant she was too real to be disposable, and everything Moon Tae-oh let himself want was disposable by design. He came back from Busan a different kind of dangerous. Quiet, watchful. He started, for the first time in 3 years, to actually see her. He noticed the flower. Monday morning, a white anemone appeared in the little glass jar, and this time he watched her set it there, watched her step back and adjust it a quarter turn so it faced the light, and something in his chest folded up small. He asked her about it, awkwardly, standing in her doorway with his coffee, and Layla looked up at him like he had grown a second head. "It's a flower," she said. "I buy myself one every Monday." "Why?" "Because I like flowers, and I'm the person in my life most reliably willing to get me some." She went back to her screen. "You've walked past that jar 400 times, Mr. Moon. It's been there since my first week." He had not known that. The fact that he had not known that sat on him all day like a stone. He began inventing reasons to be near her. He asked her to walk him through schedules he already understood. He lingered at her desk when he had no reason to linger anywhere. He, who had never once carried anything for himself if he could pay someone to carry it, took a stack of folders out of her hands one evening and walked them to the archive himself. And Layla watched him go with an expression of such profound suspicion that Min Jae, his oldest friend, and the Vante Group's chief operating officer, laughed out loud from the doorway. "You," Min Jae said later, dropping into the chair across from Tae-oh's desk, "are being extremely strange, and I want you to know I'm enjoying it enormously." He had known Tae-oh since they were 19, and he was the one person on earth allowed to say true things to his face. "You've reorganized your entire week to spend more time in a hallway. You keep looking at her desk when she's not at it. Last Tuesday, I watched you refill the coffee machine with your own 2 hands, which I did not know you knew how to operate. I don't know what you're talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about." Min Jae's smile faded into something more careful. "Tae-oh, I've watched you go through women like a man, flipping channels for 10 years. Jae-rin's about to be number I've genuinely lost count. And in all that time, I have never once seen you nervous. You're nervous. Around Layla Reed, the woman who has been running your life since before you learned her name." He let that sit. "So I'm going to say one thing, as your friend, and then I'll leave you alone. That woman is the best thing in this entire building. She is not a car. If you do to her what you do to the others, I will not forgive you, and neither will you." Tae-oh said nothing. But that night he pulled up a photograph Min Jae had shown him without meaning to, from a mutual friend's feed. Layla, at the party, thrown back in laughter, the tall stranger beside her, and he stared at it until the screen went dark, and the thing in his throat became a decision he did not know how to make. The trouble was, Layla had seen this movie before, and she knew how it ended. She was not a fool, and she was not 16. She clocked the change in him within a week, the lingering, the questions, the way his eyes found her across a room and stayed, and she understood exactly what it was, because she had watched it happen from the outside a dozen times. Moon Tae-oh had noticed she was a woman. That was all. Some other man had put a hand on her arm and woken up the part of Tae-oh that could not stand for anything in his orbit to belong to someone else. And now, briefly, she was interesting. The way a car becomes interesting again the moment a friend admires it. She would not be a car. She had watched too many beautiful women take that ride down the private elevator with a courier's box of apology jewelry in their laps. She had arranged those boxes herself. She knew precisely what she was worth, and it was more than a season on Moon Tae-oh's arm, followed by a very tasteful goodbye she would have to schedule for herself. So when Theo texted to set up their dinner, Layla said yes again, and meant it, and told herself firmly that a kind architect who looked at her like she was the only person in the room was worth 10 brooding billionaires who had needed a stranger's jealousy to remember she existed. It came to a head on a Thursday, over nothing, the way these things do. Tae-oh came out of his office at 7 to find her packing her bag, the yellow light of the desk lamp on her face, and he asked, too casually, whether she had plans. "I do, actually," Layla said. "Dinner." Something crossed his face. "With the architect." She went still. She had never told him about Theo. She had never told him anything. "How do you know about Theo?" He realized his mistake a beat too late. "It doesn't matter. It matters quite a lot, actually." Layla set her bag down slowly. "Have you had someone watching me, Mr. Moon?" "I had my driver confirm you got home safely from the party. Once." His jaw worked. "You were with a stranger. In a dress like that. I wanted to know you were safe." "A dress like what?" Her voice had gone very quiet and very level, which anyone who knew her would have recognized as the edge of something. "Say the rest of that sentence." "That's not what because I have worn structured navy blazers to that desk for 3 years, so that men like the ones who run this company would look at my work instead of my body, and it made me invisible, and you were fine with that. I was extremely convenient, invisible. And the second I put on a dress and some other man looked at me like I was worth looking at, you developed opinions." She picked her bag back up. "You don't get to do that. You had 3 years to see me. You saw me the exact minute someone else did, and you want me to be flattered." "Layla," he stepped toward her, and there was something raw in it now, something stripped of all his practiced ease. "I don't know how to do this. I've never—" "I know you don't." Her voice softened, just slightly, and that was somehow worse than the anger. That's the whole problem. You've spent your whole life making sure nothing gets to stay long enough to matter, and I have watched you do it, and I have packed the goodbye boxes, and I am not going to be one. I'm not one of your cars, Mr. Moon. You don't get to drive me for a season and trade me in when the new model comes out. She shouldered the bag. I'm going to dinner. Your Friday is handled. Good night. And she left him standing in the middle of his empire. And for the first time in his adult life, Moon Tae-oh had wanted something with his whole chest and could not simply buy it. And it had walked out the door. He did not follow her. To his credit, that once, he let her go. He drove home to the enormous, immaculate penthouse in Hanam-dong, where nothing was more than 2 years old, where the art rotated with the seasons, and the cars in the underground garage were traded before they could get comfortable, and not one single object had ever been allowed to become precious, because precious things could be taken from you. And Moon Tae-oh had learned that lesson young. He had learned it at 11, when his mother left and his father, a colder and more powerful version of the man Tae-oh would become, had sat him down and told him that this was what came of loving anyone more than they loved you, that a moon did not get attached, that attachment was leverage and leverage was death. He had learned it again at 24, when the one girl he had let himself love had turned out to be exactly the trap his father promised, in it for the name and the money, and had said so to his face on her way out with a lawyer's number in her phone. After that, Tae-oh had simply agreed with his father. He had made his whole life out of wanting nothing that could stay. Beautiful, temporary, disposable, safe. He had built an empire of luxury hotels, places designed for people to enjoy briefly and leave, and he had lived his life the same way, and he had told himself he was happy, or at least that he was untouched, which he had confused for the same thing. And then a woman had sat outside his office for 3 years, quietly holding his entire life together, buying herself flowers because no one else would, and he had looked straight through her because she was the one thing in his world that was real, and real things could not be traded, and that terrified him more than anything on earth. Sitting alone in his penthouse that night, Moon Tae-oh did something he had not done in 11 years. He let himself want something, and did not immediately kill the wanting. And when he examined it, honestly, in the dark, he found that it was not new. It had been there for a long time. This quiet, this steadiness, this thing he felt when Layla Reed handed him coffee and told him he was being an idiot about a contract. He had just refused to call it by its name, because naming it would have made it precious, and precious things could be lost. Well, he was losing it now anyway. That was the joke of it. He had done everything right by his father's rules, wanted nothing, kept nothing, and he was going to lose her all the same, to a kind architect who had known her for 3 weeks, and had understood in one evening what Tae-oh had refused to see in 3 years. 2 nights later, while Layla was at dinner with Theo across the river, Moon Tae-oh went back to the office. The building was dark and quiet. Her desk sat in a pool of streetlight, the little glass jar with its white anemone gone slightly droopy now at the end of its week. He stood there for a long moment. Then he walked into his own office, and he unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk, the one he never opened in front of anyone, and he looked at what was inside. Notes. Hundreds of them. Every handwritten note Layla Reed had ever left him in 3 years. The yellow sticky ones from her first week, in her careful, slightly rounded hand, reminding him of things he'd have forgotten. The longer ones, torn from her pad, where she'd explained a contract to him in plain language when the lawyers had made it deliberately impossible. The margins of schedules where she'd written dryly, "You will hate this meeting, I've kept it short," and the small, furious one from the day he'd been cruel to a junior analyst that just said she has a newborn, "Be a person." He had kept every one of them. He had never once asked himself why. He was a man who threw everything away, who traded his cars before the smell of new left them, who could not name a single object in his home that had been with him more than 2 years. And he had been secretly, helplessly hoarding this woman's handwriting, like a boy pressing flowers in a book, because some part of him had always known, long before the gold dress, that Layla Reed was the one thing he was never going to be able to replace. He sat on the floor of his dark office with 3 years of her notes in his lap, a billionaire who had everything, and understood at last exactly how poor he was. Then he stood up, and he made 2 phone calls. The first was to Chae-rin, and for the first time in his life, he ended a relationship himself, kindly, with his own voice, no courier, no box. The second was to Moon Tae-oh. I need your help, Tae-oh said, and I need you to tell me if I'm about to do something stupid. Almost certainly, Moon Tae said, delighted. Tell me everything. Layla was at her desk on Monday morning, arranging that week's flower, a single stem of pale pink garden rose, when she realized the whole floor had gone quiet. She looked up. Moon Tae-oh was standing in front of her desk. He was not in one of his beautiful jackets. He was in a plain dark sweater, no armor, and he looked like he had not slept. And he was holding, in both hands, like a man carrying something that might break, an armful of flowers. Not a florist's arrangement, wrapped and perfect. A loose, slightly clumsy, clearly hand-gathered bunch of them, garden roses and freesia, and butter-yellow ranunculus, all the ones she bought herself, one at a time, on Mondays. I don't know how to do this, he said. The whole floor was watching, and he did not seem to care, which, for Moon Tae-oh, was its own kind of miracle. So I'm just going to say the true things, and hope it's enough. I have walked past your desk 400 times, and never seen the flower you bought yourself, because no one else would. I have kept every note you've ever written me in a locked drawer for 3 years, and told myself I didn't know why. I have spent my whole life making sure nothing could stay long enough to matter, because I decided when I was a boy that wanting things is how they hurt you. His voice was not quite steady. And it worked, Layla. It worked perfectly. I have wanted nothing and kept nothing, and I have been the loneliest man in Seoul, sitting 8 feet from the only real thing in my life, calling it furniture so it couldn't break my heart. Layla had gone very still. Behind her, someone in accounting had stopped breathing. You were right about all of it, Tae-oh went on. I noticed you the minute someone else did. I don't have a good excuse for that, except that I was a coward, and cowards see late. But I didn't fall for you at that party. I found out at that party. There's a difference. I think I've been yours since about my 2nd week, when you handed me a contract I'd been fighting for a month, already fixed, and told me I was being dramatic, and I didn't fire you, which should have told both of us something. He held the flowers out. His hands were not entirely steady. I'm not offering you a season. I've had 100 seasons and they were all the same and none of them meant anything. I'm offering you the thing I've never once given anyone, which is permanence. And I'll probably be bad at it, and I'd like to learn it with you. Starting with this. I brought you flowers, because for 3 years you've been the only person willing to, and you shouldn't have to be anymore. For a long moment, Layla Reed did not say anything at all. She looked at the man in the plain sweater with his clumsy hand-gathered flowers. This man she had watched trade away every beautiful thing that ever got close to him. And she weighed it, honestly, the way she weighed everything, because she was nobody's fool, and never had been. She thought about the goodbye boxes. She thought about Theo, who was kind and easy and safe, and who she had told, gently, over dinner 2 nights ago, that she was sorry, but her heart appeared to be occupied by an idiot. And Theo, being a genuinely good man, had laughed and wished her luck. You kept my notes? She said finally. All of them. Tae-oh swallowed. There's a drawer. I'll show you. It's embarrassing. It really is. But something was warming at the corner of her mouth. 3 years, Moon Tae-oh. You made me invisible for 3 years. I know. And you don't get to unknow me in a week just because you brought me the right flowers. She stood and came around the desk, and she was not quite smiling, but she was close, and her eyes were bright. You're going to have to earn it. Every day, you're going to have to actually see me, on the ordinary Tuesdays, not just when I'm in a gold dress. You're going to have to be the kind of man who notices what he has, instead of the kind who only notices when someone's about to take it. Can you be that man? I don't know, Tae-oh said, with a raw honesty she had never heard from him. But I've never wanted to be anything before, and I want to be that. For you. That's a start, isn't it? It's a start. Layla took the flowers out of his hands. They were, objectively, a mess, unbalanced and a little crushed, and clearly assembled by a man who had never bought a flower in his life. And they were the most beautiful thing anyone had ever given her, precisely because of that. She buried her face in them for a second. Freesia. He'd gotten the Freesia. For the record, she said, you're still doing your own Busan schedule this weekend. I'm taking Saturday off. Anything, he said. Take the month. Don't tempt me. And then Moon Tae-oh, billionaire, playboy, the coldest catch in Seoul, the man who felt nothing on purpose, reached out with the whole of his heart for the first time in 11 years and cupped the face of the woman who had run his life for 3 years and kissed her, right there in front of the entire 40th floor, while the accounting department applauded and Min Jae, watching from the doorway, wiped his eyes and pretended he wasn't. They took it slow. After that, or as slow as two people can go when they've already spent 3 years knowing each other better than most married couples. He was, as promised, bad at it at first, and then less bad, and then, to everyone's astonishment including his own, good. He learned her Mondays. He never once let her buy her own flour again, though she teased him that she missed the flower cart woman. So he started buying 2, one for Layla and one for the old woman at the station, who thought he was very strange and took his money anyway. He kept the drawer of her notes. He added to it. And when, a long time later, on an ordinary Tuesday and not a gold dress Friday, he finally asked her to marry him, he did it with no crowd and no spectacle. Just the 2 of them and a single hand-gathered bunch of freesia and the whole quiet city out the window. And Layla Reed, who had spent her whole life refusing to wait around for anyone to bring her flowers, said yes to the man who had finally, permanently, learned how. If this one warmed you up, do 3 quick things for me. Tap that like button so more people find it. Subscribe, because the next story will get you right in the chest. And in the comments, tell me one thing you do for yourself, the way Layla buys her own flowers, because nobody should have to wait around to be seen. I read every single one. And remember, the right person won't need someone else to want you first. They'll see you on an ordinary Tuesday, and they'll never look away again. Until next time, buy yourself the flowers.